Hey, it's Friendo here, and I've been tagged by Divinity to talk about sex as a means of social control. Thank you, Divinity, for the tag. I have not been doing many videos lately, um, and I have had some thoughts about this ongoing sex negative, sex positive issue, and I think this is a good tag. For me, the issue of sexual control, sexuality as a means of control, is one of the primary reasons I am an atheist. I was raised Catholic, and I was raised with a large amount of shame concerning my sexuality. Starting about the age of 8 or 9, in my religious education, because I went to a Catholic school, I went to a series of Catholic schools until I was a sophomore in high school. So starting quite young, my religious education focused on the concept of lust. Perhaps not as the worst sin, but certainly the most prevalent. I was taught to feel that the experience of lust, of having attraction, was sinful. Perhaps it's more accurate to say the attraction is fine, but when it leads to anything, absolutely anything, outside of the confines of marriage, then it is a sin. Now, I am 30, and I am single, and I have never been married. So it would be absurd to look at my sexuality as something that only exists to service the institution of marriage. But that is how I was raised. By the age of 16, I already had a very active fantasy life. And despite having never had a sexual partner, I already had a sense of what my sexual preferences were. And that put me under severe stress. And today I masturbate on a daily basis. And back then I masturbated on a daily basis. But today I have no shame over access to the materials that I use to formulate my fantasies. And back then I did. There was one time my mom, she found a Playboy. My brother had stolen it from me. I had stolen it from someone else. But when she found it, she had a real crisis in terms of the development of our sexuality. And she had a talk with me where she said she wanted me to understand that that's not something that women want, to be portrayed as objects, to be seen the way the women in magazines do. That is not authentic sexuality. And that's a message that I've seen repeated over and over again. Now, in reference to what are the two things that I see, or kind of a fork of how it is that this social control works, it is shame and modesty. And in this sense, I think the issue is actually worse in terms of the levels of control concerning women, because they experience shame and modesty. It still has an effect on men, but I think it is more insidious, less overt. Because women are made to feel the shame for their own sexual urges, but also to feel shame for male sexual urges. The concept of modesty, of covering yourself, of not speaking suggestively, not making eye contact or flirting or any of these things, not being too playful, creates a sense that women need to be controlled and feel shame lest they cause the sin of lust in men. That somehow, were it not for the temptation of women in front of us and in our lives, then we would be pure as men. We would not be driven to sin in our lust. And those are kind of the twin parallels, the fork that I felt impaled on as I was going through my formative years. And I do think it leads to very destructive social control, that we look at ourselves as balancing on a razor blade. And if we are immodest, we fall this way. If we experience our own lust, we fall this way. Now, in fairness, I once went to confession and I told a priest about my active sexual fantasy life, and he was a young priest, he was a young man. He looked back at me and he went, "How old are you?" I said, "I'm 17. He goes, "Well, then that's totally normal. Say 10 Hail Marys and try to be a good person." And, but the following week I went to a penance mass. The priest there said, specifically in reference to the sin of lust, that for someone to receive the sacrament of communion with that kind of black stain on their soul would be the ultimate insult to the person of Jesus. It would be like taking a living body and strapping them to a corpse. That's the level of offensiveness, the level of vileness that would represent to the person of our beloved Savior. And it's a level of cognitive dissonance that I just couldn't live with. But when I was religious, I kind of had the attitude that I had to believe it, all of it, or I would be a hypocrite. And I kind of still feel that way today, and it's why I want nothing to do with the religion. So I feel that if I accepted any of its tenets, I would be a hypocrite, because there are those tenets that I find absolutely repulsive, that I absolutely could not believe. And so that is how I see, in terms of the social institution of religion, which I think does have wider implications, particularly as our, in America, society is largely reflective of Judeo-Christian values. That's how I see that method of control. Because it's one thing to cause shame in others. That's a very overt kind of control. But that's not really, if you're trying to control society, if you're trying to set the rules, to keep people in their place, that's not what you want. You want people shaming themselves. And that's how I see it being employed.